Hi, everyone. You've reached No Kill in Motion. I'm David Smith with No Kill Colorado. We're talking to CARE AWO today. CARE, their mission is in the interest of human and animal well-being, prioritizes and amplifies BIPOC voices using narratives, research, and community-centered investments. If you're not familiar with BIPOC, it stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And I'm here today with James Davyd, the CEO. It's great to see you again, James. We haven't talked in about a year. It's good to see you. How's everything going?
And good to see you as well. And just by the way, that the AWO part of that's just the web URL, CARE AWO. We generally just refer to ourselves as CARE, or the long name Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity. But it's good to see you.
Well, it's good. It's good to get the website out there. So it is careawo.org.
Yes,
if you
sir.
want more about James and more about this organization, it's a wonderful organization. I encourage everybody to get out there. James, you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, not just animal welfare, but dealing with communities. One of the things that when we first met, I didn't know that you had really launched, HSUS's Pets for Life, which was remarkable and kind of really a community changing program, which was really great. Then you went on to make CARE. And I was looking through it earlier today, and I came across your quote, and I really want to ask you about it. You said, "We decided to focus on racial equity because without it, social justice and inclusion are delusions." I really love this quote. I want you to expand on it a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you for historically having us on and supporting us, and we really appreciate it. I should say that, from the outset. That quote stems from a frustration I think many BIPOCs have, that we see things like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery, and society, particularly non-BIPOC members of society, white folks, if you want to make it plain, want to move very swiftly towards engaging in their version of social justice or inclusion. And for many BIPOCs, I think the frustration is we can't seem to get to the root of the problem, which is the lack of racial equity, the lack of a structure being put in place to augment the structural racism that exists. So for instance, you have national spay-neuter groups that I've been involved with, and I'm not naming names at this point, but I think you can get it.
Sure.
That have leveraged their spay-neuter activity in underserved communities and are now calling it social justice. And that's not social justice. That's free spay-neuter is socially responsible, and it's great all by itself. But in this era of racial reckoning, folks are taking on a broader view of their work and calling it social justice or inclusion work, and it's not at all. So Pets for Life is not inclusion work. Just because the program tends to work in BIPOC communities, that is socially responsible work that is being done in a specific area, but that's not racial equity. Racial equity would be for leadership to look at where it's doing the work and work earnestly to ensure that you're not just serving folks in BIPOC communities, but they're actually at the table, that they're actually part of leadership. And so when you see a large white organization working in an underserved Black community, and that large white organization has hardly any Black staff on a leadership side in its national office, to me, that organization does not realize that racial equity should come first, and then we move on to social justice. And that's how we make inclusion happen, right? So
It's more of a savior mentality.
that I think it is a savior mentality, but I think it's also a cleanup mentality. It's as if, you live in a really, really messy house and you get surprised by a VIP guest. The president is announced is going to stop by your house. And so you rush around and you throw, clothes under a sofa, and you put your dirty dishes in the oven. And so your house appears to be clean, but you haven't solved the root of the problem, which is that you're essentially just a messy person. And so, sure, for that moment that you're getting some attention and the president's in your house, you appear to be neat and orderly. But the reality is, racial equity would involve sitting back and saying, our house is pretty messy. How do we go about cleaning this up where it works for everyone, not just reacting and saying, oh, George Floyd just happened. I've got to rush out here and I've got to make sure I have brown folks who are put in positions where they're thingified and they are they're essentially tokenized just that we can appear to have our house in order. And that's happening all over the country, not just in the industry. I never want to make it seem like animal welfare is somehow less diverse or less inclusive than the country is as a whole. It's just the byproduct of sort of every day in the US.
Absolutely. And that brings me actually to a quote. We actually talked about this over a year ago when we talked last time on your site, because I think it's important to repeat and actually to mention African Americans make up only 4% of staff and less than 1% of leadership in animal welfare organizations. I know you're doing a lot of research. I don't know if you researched this or not. Have you seen any change there? Do you see any? What do you see happening? Is there any progress being making, or you feel like there is, or are you feeling like we're still stunted and we're not getting there?
Animal welfare is not getting there nearly fast enough. There are lots and lots of performative things happening, similar to putting the dirty dishes in your oven, where Black and BIPOC leaders are being hired, but we constantly hear these stories of those very same new hires lasting 2 or 3 months and then being fired or dismissed, or their budgets have been so greatly reduced that they can't do the work that they were hired for. And many of them are being hired to initiate a DEI strategy, right? And so I don't think that I've ever suggested that we want to see more BIPOC hiring in the DEI space. So you end up being the only Black person being hired in an all-white organization, and your sole purpose is to try to convince those folks that more brown people should be there. I don't see that as progress. We're looking for brown and Black folks to be hired as EDs, as CEOs, as CFOs, as managers, as development officers. There's a cadre of talents that are needed in shelter and rescuing in large organizations, and to seek people of color out for a DEI position or an inclusive position, I just think, completely misses the mark. But at CARE, obviously, all of our chiefs, I consider to be animal welfare leadership. Our Proximate Leaders that we have funded and helped them initiate their 501c3s, those are new leaders. And so next year, when we redo the study, there will probably be a slight bump up, but that will be more of a reflection, I think, of CARE's work than animal welfare as a collective.
Okay, well, let's talk about CARE's work. So I want to talk to our audience about CARE's Caregivers Circle. Tell us more about what you're doing in that program.
So Caregivers Circle is a place for everyone to get involved. And that so a lot of our work obviously is focused on BIPOC advancement, BIPOC protection, BIPOC investment. But the Caregiver Circle is for BIPOC and non-BIPOCs to collectively work on this thing together. We're not of the mindset to say that there are no white allies out there. We know well that there are white allies out there. You had me on this show early on, and I'll be frank with you. There are some of the largest animal welfare organizations that I've reached out to and have not reached back out to me. And so I think there's a big difference between you reaching out to me and them not reaching out to me. And so there are white allies out there. And so the Caregiver Circle is designed for those white allies and those Black leaders and those Black enthusiasts in the field, BIPOC enthusiasts in the animal welfare field, and beyond, to collectively get together around supporting issues. And so that's what the Caregiver Circle is all about.
All right, and you mentioned Proximate Leaders just a minute ago, and I was looking at that on the website a little bit. Tell us what the importance of this, and what is a Proximate Leader? Let's start there.
Yeah, so Proximate Leaders are people that are already leading in communities that they live in. They're proximate to the problem, and so often underserved people do not get credit for their own sort of genius and tenacity and frankly creativity for serving their communities sort of without recognition. We met a man, for instance, in California, a Hispanic man. He's probably in his 60s. And he absolutely loves dogs, and he's retired. I think a retired trash collector or something. I can't remember what his occupation was. But he noticed that a lot of the young people around him both had kids and dogs and were working. And so he opened his house up as a doggy daycare for free, right? So this man is solving a problem, I think, on an epic scale, right? Because as a young parent, you could easily get frustrated. You certainly aren't going to drop the kid off at a shelter, but you might decide, wow, this is too much for me, and now we've got to lose this dog that we love. But now you have this man come in out of the kindness of his heart and says, no, I will take your dog all day. You go to work. And that kind of thing is happening all the time. I grew up, I saw that constantly my whole life. My mom always had kids in the house, always. And so I think too often we think of communities like Compton or Baltimore and Detroit, and because the news media wants us to focus on the death and destruction that does happen, we also miss out on all these like lovely, beautiful stories about people who are doing the best they can to uplift their community members. And so that's what CARE is doing. We're going back into communities and saying, oh, you know what? You're doing TNR, you're doing it by yourself, and you may or may not understand the best practices. And in a lot of cases, folks don't even know animal welfare exists. So we're saying, don't stop doing what you're doing. But here's some information. Here's Sterling, Trap King Davis. He's going to help you. He's going to guide you through this process. And we're also going to help you get 501c3 status so that you're not doing this work alone, because many people are feeding and doing their version of TNR out of their own pockets. And so we're essentially introducing folks to animal welfare. But I like to say we're HBCUing the thing. Historically Black colleges. Historically Black colleges were developed in this country in the 1900s because white colleges wouldn't accept Black students, nor would white colleges accept Black professors or teachers. And so we're assuming that in every community, there is a proximate leader interested in animal welfare. Murder is proximate. Most of us are killing people that are near us. So also love is proximate, right? Compassion is proximate. We're also most likely helping people that are near us. And so we're investing in that love and compassion part.
I love that. I actually make that argument in general, not as much from the view that you've been coming at it, although that's been changing, right? Is that, locally is where we can really make the most impact.
Yes.
In our own lives, right?
Yes.
My organization really stays inside the borders of Colorado, which is already big, right? But we don't go outside of that because there's plenty to do right here,
Right.
It's right here. And
Yes.
There is the compassion and the love in the community. We need to take advantage of that and make sure that we do it. So we're out of time for this segment. I could talk forever to you, James, but we have to go. And we'll be back with James Evan in some other segments. James is from CARE. You can go to careawo.org, find out more. James, thanks for being here. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks, David.